The 13th of December 2022, I gave the first speech questioning the safety and efficacy of the vaccines and urging the government to certainly not authorise them for infants and babies. From that moment, ladies and gentlemen, my life changed. I'd been on the television 3-4 times a week. I was in the papers a lot. And effectively I was cancelled. The government said I was talking rubbish. And the BBC gave me my last interview and interviewed me for BBC East Midlands, my own area, Nottingham. That's where the studio was. They came out to me and said, Andrew Bridgen, why have you sacrificed your political career on the hill of vaccine harms? And I said to the BBC reporter, because that's the hill you're killing my people on. And they said, well, you've thrown your career away. I said, well, what does my career really matter when we're talking about the lives of children? And I said, I will be vindicated on this. And whatever you say, our government never dared authorise those vaccines, those experimental vaccines for healthy children under 5 in this country. And we're one of the few countries where that didn't happen. And people say, well, you lost everything for doing that. Who gets a chance to help try and save the lives of children? What an opportunity. Who would ever? And when they threw me out of the Conservative Party, announced that they'd had an investigation into my behaviour, my remarks about the vaccines, without me being able to give my evidence in person, and I was expelled for life. Do you know the last person who, and a senior Tory grandee said to me that my last warning in his office, had an hour and a half with him about the vaccines, and I knew this grandee pretty well. I stayed at his house, met his wife, met his kids, spoken in his area. He'd spoken in my area for me. And I knew, he didn't know I knew, that his own sister had had 2 Pfizer jabs and had to go to hospital with chest pains. So he knew. And at the end of an hour and a half of me telling him all my concerns, he turned round to me and said, Andrew, there is currently no political appetite for your views on the vaccines. There may be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then. But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world with all the personal risk for you which that will entail should you choose to continue. And I stood up and said, I think this meeting's over. And they threw me out of the Conservative Party. And all those people I've been in Parliament with for 12 years, a lot of them I thought were my friends. Nobody rang me or texted me or anything, or came round to see me in my office to say anything. How are you? But I did get a phone call on my mobile, unsolicited, within an hour of the news coming out. And it was an American presidential candidate who rang me. It was Robert Kennedy Jr. And he said, it's disgusting what they've done to you, and I will back you. And he is sort of in a position now, isn't he? I think he's a good man. We're all human. They try and find your weaknesses. They try and blackmail you. They try and threaten you. And we're all human. If politicians weren't human, I mean, they used to say that to me. He said, do you think you're perfect? I said, no. I have as many failings, as many human frailties as the people I represent. And it's a good job I do, because otherwise the laws would be passed would be for a perfect world. And we don't live in a perfect world by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm not as imperfect as most of the people in the House of Commons, I can tell you, who wouldn't stand up to even save the lives of small children when they knew it. I don't know whether it's compromat they've got on them, blackmail, whether they have taken incentives, or whether it's just blind fear. Because, to be honest, most MPs are not very brave. They won't take a chance. They value their careers more than finding out the truth. And they were supposed to speak in the chamber of the House of Commons. The rules are you speak without fear or favour. And my experience was that there's a lot of fear because they threaten you, and there's a lot of favour because they try and bribe you. Exactly the opposite of what they're supposed to be. And I spoke by January 23. I'd come back from America. I spent all of Christmas 2022, all that recess, on my own funds, I didn't charge the taxpayer because I didn't want them to know, I went to America and met with Ron Johnson and a load of scientists. And I came back to Parliament, and then they suspended me from Parliament for 5 days without pay, right? And I remember going into Ron Johnson's office on Capitol Hill. He's the senator for Wisconsin. He's chairing all of these Senate committees on looking at the safety and efficacy of the vaccines and the pandemic response. He knew. And I remember walking up, and the two biggest mistakes I ever made in my life was having 2 AstraZeneca shots, right? Before I realised what was going on. Even I didn't think the government would do that to us. And I walked into Ron Johnson's office that Christmas, and he looked at me. We'd spoken on the phone plenty of times, but never met. He looked at me from behind his big desk with his carpet with the eagle and the flag and all that business. They're much nicer than MP's offices, I can tell you. And he said, Andrew, gee, he said, you're a bright guy. He said, why'd you put that poison in your veins? In January 23, we got desperate excess deaths. As everyone would know, after a conventional pandemic, when the elderly and the vulnerable have passed earlier than they should have done, excess deaths during a pandemic, there has to be a time after the pandemic when you have less than expected deaths. Because obviously, if the vulnerable and elderly who might have lived 6 or 12 or 18 months longer, they died sadly during a pandemic, they can't die when they might have done 6, 12, 18 months longer. But we didn't. After the vaccine rollout, we kept having excess deaths. 1,500, 2,000 a week. ONS were producing them all the time. So I tried to get a debate in Parliament on excess deaths. There'd not been a debate on excess deaths anywhere in the world. In Parliament, you can put in for a Westminster Hall debate. You can put in for an adjournment debate at the end of the day. You can put in for a main hall debate. You can put in for lots of different debates. You can only put in once a week, and you can only put in, though, during sitting weeks. So in the recess holiday time, when Parliament's not sitting, you can't put in for a debate. I put in every week for 9 months. And every week it came back on it's 26 times. That was, with the summer holidays, that was 9 months. I never got a debate. It kept coming back. Unsuccessful in ballot on the computer every week. Unsuccessful in ballot. And I put it back in again. Unsuccessful in ballot. Well, I mean, this never happens. You can see why I don't play the lottery, can't you? You know? Unlucky. And so, I did some work in the summer recess. I thought, they must have done this before, because it feels like everything's happened before. And I started researching thalidomide. Yep. And I found out, I got some papers and some research from the library. Thalidomide was created by a German company called Chemie Grünenthal. Grünenthal was formed after the war in devastated Germany, and their scientists they recruited from the Nazi Party. Their lead scientist was a man called Heinrich Mulke, Dr. Heinrich Mulke. He was indicted for war crimes in Poland for experimenting with typhus on the Poles. He was never convicted. He went on to create a drug called thalidomide. The company gave it for free to its staff before it was marketed, and one of the wives of one of the employees gave birth to a baby with no ears, and they never said anything. They pushed it out. Was only on the market for a couple of years before it was withdrawn on safety concerns. Thalidomide was a drug that was prescribed for nausea. Its marketing ploy was, its USP was that you couldn't overdose on it, supposedly. So you could take as much as you wanted. Even with aspirin, you're not supposed to take too much. So that was its sales ploy, was that you couldn't overdose on it. What they actually found out later was that thalidomide crossed the blood placenta barrier, went into the unborn fetus, and prevented angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is the formation of blood vessels, and depending on the time of gestation of the fetus and the amount of thalidomide that the mother took, that was the amount of the disability of the baby. And bear in mind that nearly half of the babies died anyway. They were born, they miscarried or were dead at birth, and the rest were born with varying degrees of pretty horrific disability, mostly with very short arms and legs, because the thalidomide was stopping the formation of the long blood vessels for those limbs to form properly. Do you know what the marketing slogan was for thalidomide? Safe and effective. And actually, after thalidomide, laws were passed that prevented Big Pharma from using the term safe and effective to describe one of their medications without serious caveats. But of course, during the COVID pandemic, it wasn't Big Pharma that did the marketing. It was your politicians and your civil servants and your medical leaders of our health service and the health advisors. They were the ones saying it was safe and effective, not Big Pharma, because Big Pharma legally couldn't. It was actually a nurse in Australia Nurse Swallow, who kicked off about the link between thalidomide and the birth defects. And no one listened to her to start with, but eventually they had to. And thalidomide was withdrawn in 1961. What I can show you is, and I won't show you this video, it probably won't play anyway, but I made a video that summer called Thalidomide The Real Story. You can look at it on YouTube. If you go Andrew Bridgen on YouTube, Thalidomide The Real Story. It's about 20 minutes. We haven't got time for it. But what that shows you is that Grunethal also had an injunction on the Times newspaper to stop them running stories about the link between thalidomide and the birth defects that they'd seen. And that ran for 11 years. And when it was overturned in 1972, the judges in Strasbourg said, 3 judges said in their judgment that speakers of the House of Commons had deliberately suppressed all debate and questions on thalidomide for 11 years. So the first debate was 11 years after the drug was withdrawn. And Grunethal then, guess what? They set up a compensation scheme for the victims, £3 million. They'd made a lot more money than that out of thalidomide. And with £3 million, who would have thought it? They bought themselves immunity from prosecution in return for setting up a pathetic £3 million fund for the victims. There are 3,000 victims still alive now in the UK. They'll be nearing retirement, and I imagine their needs will only increase with age. £3 million won't go very far, will it? That was the whole pot. And even worse, when I looked into it, in 1961, you might recall that Spain was not a democracy. It didn't have any MPs to ask difficult questions or even be silenced by the Speaker of the House of Commons. And the group representing thalidomide victims in Spain is called Avante. And they got hold of a letter in 1961 written from Grunenthal, Berlin, or Germany, to Grunenthal headquarters in Madrid. And when you translate it from the Spanish, it says basically, we're withdrawing thalidomide across Europe, but if you don't want to tell the Spanish doctors, we'll stick with you. They knew exactly what it was doing to the babies, the unborn babies. And there's a fair bit of evidence that Grunenthal carried on marketing thalidomide under another name in Spain until 1985. These are the people we're dealing with. People think that Big Pharma, pharmaceutical industry, is benevolent. Their only fiduciary duty is to make profit for their shareholders. They have no fiduciary duty to give you, me, or anybody else safe and effective medicine. In America, Big Pharma is a $3,000 billion a year industry, which has enormous profits, enormous ability to influence politicians. You know, when I saw RFK Jr. being harassed by Elizabeth Warren, in his approvals hearing, that woman had taken $6.3 million from Big Pharma. You know, good old Bernie Sanders, he'd taken, what was it, $1.6 million the year before from Ben. He was getting, you know. I think in the developed world, you can be very cheerful because I can assure you, you've got the best politicians that money can buy. The best politicians that money can buy. And that's why I think no one would stand and tell the truth. So I sent a copy of that video to Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, in end of August when we came back in September, and I sent a note with it saying, you need to look at this, and we don't want history repeating itself, do we, Lindsay? And then he found me a debate on excess deaths, and gave me a date 3 weeks later. Yep. And that was the first debate on excess deaths anywhere in the world. And you might recall that the chamber was empty. No one was interested in excess deaths. You know, it's happening across every constituency, every community, every week. No explanation. But nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And the chamber was empty. But you might remember, and some of you may have even been there, that the public gallery was full. Yep. Shall we have a look at it? Do you remember? For a proportion of the people who took them, the vaccines have caused serious harm and death, and they will have raised the risk of cancer to many, many more. Neither are they effective. The vaccine does not prevent infection or transmission, and when the data is looked at objectively, it does not prevent serious illness or death either. These are very hard truths to face, but we must face them, Madam Deputy Speaker, if we want to learn the lessons of the last few years. At some point, we'll have to face up that all the evidence is building. It was fairly convincing 18 months ago when I first spoke out. It is unequivocal now. So I asked the House, it's time to take the politics out of our science, and we need to put some actual science back into our politics. Yeah. I asked the House to support the motion today for the Baroness Hallett's inquiry to open Module 4 on the safety and efficacy of the experimental COVID-19 vaccines. And given the evidence, Madam Deputy Speaker, I call on the government once again to immediately suspend the use of all mRNA treatments in both humans and animals, pending the outcome of that inquiry.
No. We would have to clear the gallery if Clapping continues. I would order it if necessary.
After my first adjournment debate, I managed to get enough colleagues. I got a load of scientists to come over from America and from the UK, and we had a committee meeting, a committee room, which I had booked months in advance, the biggest one in Parliament, in Portcullis House, the Boothroyd room. Who had I got? Pierre Corey coming over. I had to raise 22 grand myself to pay for the Americans to come over to speak to our MPs about what the concerns were. This is in December 23. And I got Pierre Corey to come over. I got Dr. Ryan Cole to come over again. I had Peter McCullough on a link. I had Steve Kirsch, the analyst, coming over. Angus Dalgleish came. And I had David E. Martin, Dr. David E. Martin has got... David E. Martin told me privately that he'd been offered $100 million to shut up. $100 million. Well, I suppose anything you want in the world. Yeah. $100 million. And he wouldn't. These are good people. And we managed, because of that meeting, and the parliamentary authorities sought to destroy that meeting for me. It was in the diary for months. I invited every MP to come and listen to what these medical experts said about what was going on with the vaccines. I did get 22 MPs to come and listen, because they didn't have to be on television and be seen watching it, did they? It was a private meeting. The House authorities in Parliament tried to stop that meeting. They cancelled the room at the last minute and said the room is now needed for a committee of the House of Commons. So that's the rules. Yours is a private meeting, so you can't have that room. We'll give you another room somewhere else in the palace. So all the people, the invites, were going to the wrong place. Yeah. At no notice at all. I sent somebody to the room that we'd been booked for 3 months and said, sit there, a member of staff, I said, and see who comes in. See which committee's using the room that we were going to have. No one came in. Right? They put security guards, for the first time ever in Parliament, they put security guards on the doors to dissuade people from coming in to this private meeting. And they were taking names. So anyone who's thinking, I don't really want to, be public about this, they wouldn't come in. That's never happened in Parliament before. I said, why have you got security guards outside the committee meeting where I've got scientists talking to MPs and members of the House of Lords. They said, we heard there might be trouble. You mean, might be trouble? Might be when they find out what you've done to them. Yes, there might be some trouble, but not in this meeting. So, and the best bit was that I'd asked the audio-visual people in Parliament. In a room like this, you'd have 4 or 5 TVs, and they can sync them all, so they all play the same, so that we could have Peter McCullough online from America, and he could speak to the room, Dr. Peter McCullough. And those bastards had brand new TVs in Parliament. They've got no buttons on them. They're all remote control. They turned the volume right down, then took the remote controls out of the room, so couldn't play anything. I mean, they're just mistakes. Just mistakes. But despite that, we managed to get 22 MPs. That was enough then for me to go and petition for a Westminster Hall debate of 90 minutes. And I got that for, I think it was January, sometime in January, 17th of January. And guess what? So I've got my debate, which I'll be leading. Excess deaths. You can have 2 on the same topic, and then you have to change the name. You can't keep having debates with the same title. So we did another one on excess deaths. I think it was 17th of January. And a week before, it's already in the diary for my big debate, I get a text message, and it's from the World Economic Forum. Would I like to go to Davos? All expenses paid, travel, dinner, get to give a speech, stay in the hotel, bit of skiing. Mysteriously, the day they'd invited me was the 17th of January. The same day I was supposed to be leading. And I was pretty angry about that, because it's a pretty blatant what they're up to, isn't it? But you have to reflect on this. So what I did was I thought I was going to tell them where to go. So I thought, no, I won't. I'll bring them into my killing ground. So I texted them back and said, I'm very, very interested in this. Please send me all the photographs of where I'll be staying and the dinner, and send me the menus and all the good things, and the private jet and everything, and I'll be there for you. Just let me just sort it. And they sent this email with everything, and I just banged it all onto the internet and said, I'm not going. And they got really mardy about it. I'm afraid Uncle Klaus Schwab got pretty upset with me at that point. I can imagine it, though. Can't you imagine it? Me in Davos, rubbing shoulders with the super elite. Yep. I could have had a nice speech, nice dinner, nice drinks in the bar afterwards. And, I'm sure there'd have been some very attractive young ladies in the bar afterwards, wouldn't there? Some of them might even have been 18. You know what I mean? Amazing. Just think I came over on a plank. I don't know. So we did the debate there. I spoke for, I think, about 35 minutes, my opening speech, and the rest of the MPs got about 4 minutes each. So that wasn't long enough. So then we put in, and we got a full debate for 3 hours in the main chamber in April 2024. What else had I been doing? Well, I got a bit of a reputation for tackling the issues that nobody else wants to talk about. The war in Ukraine. You're not being told the truth. We're not being told the truth in the West about the origins of the war, the progress of the war, our part in the war. I actually said last June that Rishi Sunak did not want to be a wartime Prime Minister. He had told, I got my moles in the Ministry of Defence, and Rishi had told the generals and the Air Vice Marshals and the Admirals that he didn't want to be a wartime Prime Minister. I think by the number of times that Keir Starmer puts his khaki on, his combats on, you can judge that Keir Starmer does want to be a wartime Prime Minister. Now, we're currently in a situation where the globalists are running our governments. They've been doing it for a long time, but they've upped the ante. So any government that gets in is going to be doing things that are very, very unpopular. Because it doesn't matter what they promised. Keir Starmer didn't promise. He promised to cut £300 from every household's heating bills, didn't he? Energy bills. What did he do? He took the winter fuel allowance off the old age pensioners and put energy prices up 9% the same October. And they're going to go up again. People are going to become very, very unpopular. Starmer is now the most unpopular Prime Minister in history, in record time. And I predicted when he got in that it would be the shortest political honeymoon in history. But even his fall has shocked me. He doesn't want any elections, does he? Because he'll be out. I have a confession to make. I have a friend who's a Labour MP. Not on a political level, on a personal level. He's confused, but he's got a good heart. And I've known him for 15 years. He's been elected 5 times. I got elected 4 times. And he said, he rang me up a couple of weeks ago, And I said to him, how'd you like being on the government benches? I said, for 14 years when I was there, you always wanted to be on the government benches, not the opposition. I said, how's it going? He said, it's terrible. He said, we're all out at the next, we're finished. So the Labour Party's finished. I've had my seat's been Labour since Noah was a small boy. He said, and I'm gone. It's no point. So not even after 1 year in government, we're out. Done. He said, one or two of the newbies think we might be able to claw it back. He says, but they're deluded. I said, well, look at what you've been voting for. Look at what you've been voting. I said, I wouldn't have voted to take the winter fuel allowance off, and we're predicted to have the coldest winter for 15 years. And I said, and I wouldn't have voted to cut benefits to the severely disabled. I said, do you think if you're severely disabled and you cut the benefits, do you think it's going to make them be able to work? And he's supposed to be a socialist. And I said, and I hope, tell me, you didn't vote for that disgusting decriminalisation of abortion up to birth. I said, which you wouldn't get 3% of the general population to vote for that. I said, and it flew through the House of Commons. He said, Andrew, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, it's that bad, I don't even look at the order paper anymore. He says, because I can sleep better if I don't know what we're voting for. And that's a 5-term MP on the government benches. That's the state of your democracy now. They're going to vote for anything, right? They know they're gone. And all this stuff, there's going to be an early general... There is not going to be an early general election because they're not voting. The turkeys do not vote for Christmas. Right? That's the state in the mother of all parliaments, where they'd rather not know what they're voting for because they can sleep better. Well, I can't. What happened in my election? I'm absolutely convinced that my vote was rigged. There are a lot of very... I'm convinced it was rigged. A year out from the election, I got wind that the local authority, which is North West Leicestershire District Council, coterminous with the seat of North West Leicestershire, which is very handy, I got wind on a Friday that the whole elections department at the local council resigned en masse on a Friday and were replaced by a whole new team of people. I mean, how often does that happen in local government? Never. And then I found out that I'd agreed with the local council a long time ago that the council offices were not brilliant. They're on a big site in the centre of the town. And that the strategy for the town would be, the best way, would be to move all the customer-facing services that the council provide into empty shops in the shopping centre to increase the footfall, and to move the back office services into offices on the industrial estate round the corner that the council already own. Demolish the council building, leave the listed building at the front as a registry office, and then that can be a leisure area for the town. We were thinking about a bowling alley, possibly a small cinema, cafes and restaurants, a sort of nighttime bit of economy for Colville. And that obviously was progressing, I thought. What I didn't know is that the only department they were going to leave in those old offices that looked like they were all shut down, and there's a lot of offices, it was just the elections department were left there 6 months before the election, completely unsupervised by any other part of the council. They stayed in the old buildings. Why would you do that? So we got to the election. I had more people delivering leaflets for me in North West Leicestershire than anybody else. I'm an independent. I'm not a Conservative anymore, but I was an independent. I had more people delivering leaflets. I delivered more leaflets. And my vote was 63% in 2019, but that was then. I thought I was going to win with about 36, 37% on a four-way split. which is only just over half what I got last time. We got to the count at our new £26 million sports and leisure centre, paid for by the economic growth we've delivered, best in the country. And the returning officer, who's also new, who's the chief exec, she's new as well. Everything's changing mysteriously. And she's a lady who's on a lot of money. And she's a good public speaker. And she'll get probably a £30,000 bonus for being the returning officer for a general election or a local election. That's about, what, 25, 30,000 on top of a salary of probably 130,000, plus a big fat pension. She's a competent woman. And she stands at, and first thing is, she's banned any recording at the count. No TV cameras. Because I had some independent TV people wanted to film my count. Well, nobody allowed to have, no. Well, that's not normal. We normally have film cameras at the count. She banned all those. Then we got in there at 10 o'clock. She stands up and she's shaking. She's actually trembling and she can't speak. And she said in a very shaky voice, I've got to make an announcement. It's going to take a long time to bring the ballot boxes in tonight. We might not get onto the count proper until 2 in the morning. That's 4 hours after the polls have closed. Right, and she knew in advance. My seat had actually got a little bit smaller on the boundary changes, not bigger. That's our 5th general election, and we always get the ballot boxes in 35 minutes. Why was it suddenly going to take a very long time to bring the ballot boxes in? No one saw the ballot boxes opened. When the ballot boxes came in, my vote was about 3%. My recognition on the doorstep was over 95% by name, that people knew. And if they called me Mr. Bridgen, I had to ask them if you're going to vote for me, or they called me Andrew. It got worse. 2 days after the election, I get a phone call from someone who was a constituent who I'd been in contact with since the madness started, 2019. And they said to me, I need to tell you something. He said, my wife and I voted for you. Very disappointed. I mean, every time I go outside the house, everyone voted for me. That's what they tell me. I don't have to ask them. They tell me they voted for me like they always did. He said, I work for Ipsos Mori, and it was my job to do the exit poll in your constituency. And he said, we got everything sorted. We got all the people recruited. We knew where we were going to vote, going to poll. He said it was going to be Huddlestoke Community Centre, which is actually where I voted myself on 7:30 in the morning. Huddlestoke Community Centre. There were 5 people in the queue behind me when I voted. And believe it or not, I voted for me. It's the only sensible candidate on the list. And by the time I got in the car park to drive out, 2 of the people in the queue behind me had actually came to me and said, I've just voted for you. So I knew I'd got at least half the votes in that queue. Well, that meant the next 94 people who came in definitely didn't vote for me, because I only got 3%, didn't I? So anyway, this guy said, well, what happened at the exit poll? He said, we didn't do it. 2 weeks before the general election, despite the fact that he knew that Ipsos Mori was struggling to get people all around the country to man these polling stations. He said what they do is you have to have cover for toilet breaks, lunch breaks. You've got to have people there from 7 in the morning till 10 at night. You count the people out of the polling station and you ask every 4th person how they voted. They tell you, and you write that down and send that to London, and that's your exit poll at 10 o'clock. He said, despite the fact that they were struggling nationally and we were all sorted in North West Leicestershire, he says, my boss said, stand down, we do not wish to poll North West Leicestershire. Why wouldn't you want to poll North West Leicestershire? Perhaps because the exit poll wouldn't match the votes in the boxes, would it? They also did not poll, mysteriously, George Galloway's seat either. That's just a coincidence, isn't it? I bumped into a retired police officer. In 14 years as an MP in an area, I had a head of police change probably every 2 or 3 years, and one of the earlier ones who's retired, I bumped into him a couple of months after the election at a filling station in Colville, and he came over to me. We had a very good working relationship, and he asked me how I was, and I said, "Well, I'm not happy, am I? I'm not happy that the votes of the people in North West were stolen. You know." I said, "We have rucks of debates in Parliament about voter fraud, where somebody, stopping someone from voting in someone else's name or voting twice." I said, "We never have any debates about election fraud where a whole election is rigged. We just never have an election about that, a debate about that." And I said, they fixed that election here. And he looked me in the eye. This is a retired police officer. He said, "Andrew," he said, "what did you expect them to do to you?" And even today, when I walk around North West Leicestershire, when I'm going to the coffee shop, a restaurant, a pub, or going to the nature reserves, people tell me they voted for me and they can't understand what possibly happened. So, I believe the ballot boxes were taken to another location. That's the only explanation. No one can explain to me why it took so long to bring the ballot boxes in and how they knew it was going to take longer. I think they were taken somewhere. I think my votes were taken out. And obviously they have to put votes in to make the numbers tally. This would explain why they made a mistake and chucked too many ballots into one of the boxes, which then came in, and there was a lot more ballots in the ballot box than they'd given out in the polling station, which is a concept which is hard to understand, isn't it? So I don't think we have free and fair elections. And I think I've just publicising something on X now. Who knows where Moldova is? It's the poorest country in Europe. It's between Romania and Ukraine. And there's a little part of Moldova called Transnistria, which is occupied by the Russians. A little slither down the side of a... Yeah. The woman Prime Minister, the lady Prime Minister, no woman, not a lady, Prime Minister of Moldova, they've got to have elections now, coming up. The ruling party is 15% behind. There's been a leak of 100,000 emails from this political party who are in power in Moldova. All the emails about how their strategy is to get this 15% is that they don't have much support in Transnistria, where the Russians are in occupation, because they're an anti-Russian party, pro-NATO, pro-EU. So they've decided they're going to cut drastically the number of polling stations in Transnistria to cut the votes against them. It's all in the emails. That's what they're going to do, because they're the government, so they can do that. And they've got other measures to... They said they're calling on... What do we always say? There shouldn't be any external influence on elections. We'll be calling on our friends around the world to help us win this election. All social media and all that business. And then it says, but don't worry. Even if we don't get the 15% and we lose the election, don't worry. We've recruited 3 judges and we're going to annul the election if we don't win. Right? And that evidence is all there. They're the emails. They came out last week and I got sent them. That is election rigging in Europe. We saw it in Romania. Georgescu, the presidential candidate, won the first round handsomely. Anti-World Economic Forum, anti-WHO. He's a former chairman of the Club of Rome. He knows everything. And they just declared the elections void in Romania and banned him from being a candidate. That is the state of democracy. I don't think Starmer wants an election. Macron doesn't want an election, does he? He'll be gone. Merz doesn't want an election in Germany. They had some local elections. AfD vote went up 300% in Northern Rhine, and the socialist vote collapsed. What's the one thing that can stop elections? A war. So, the false flag that you saw with the dummy drones into Poland, whose interest was that in? Was it in Russia's interest to send those dummy drones with no explosives on them into Poland, violating NATO airspace? No, it was in Ukraine. You think Ukraine haven't captured over the last few years lots of drones or shot enough down that they can repair? Whose interest was it really in? Following that, it's not been reported in here, but I got it out of Le Monde, translated it from the French. Rutte's now saying that he's gone to Trump. What he wants to do is to put air defence systems on the NATO-Ukrainian border in Poland and Romania and shoot down any Russian drones or aircraft over Ukraine. That, ladies and gentlemen, will be war. And it's not even being reported in our newspapers. But that shouldn't surprise you, because I went to all those newspapers in 2014 with all the evidence of the post office scandal. They wouldn't run it. I went to them in 2021, 2022 about excess deaths and vaccine harms. They wouldn't run it. We do not have a free and fair press in this country. And I'm actually convinced now, you know, we poke fun at African countries and other countries around the world and say, oh, they're all corrupt. I believe we have the most corrupt country in the world. We've been doing it a very long time. And they're very, very good at hiding it. And if you control the media, Malcolm X said it. It was a brilliant speech by Malcolm X. And his quote was, before they assassinated him, was that the media have the most power in the world because they have the power to make the innocent appear guilty and the guilty appear innocent, and they use it. And how many times? But it's not all darkness, because we've got RFK in as head of Health and Human Services in America. Obviously, I've spoken with him on the phone. I've never met him, but I've Zoomed with him and I've spoken to him on the phone. I think he's a good man. I have spoken on Zoom with Jay Bhattacharya, who's now head of National Institute for Health. That's Anthony Fauci's old job. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is no Anthony Fauci, I can tell you. He's a thoroughly decent man. You've got Aseem Malhotra out there advising on MAHA. You've got Robert Malone on the vaccine committee now. You've got Angus Dalgleish helping them on cancer. There are some really good people out there, and I've had private conversations with them. I think by the middle of next week, I think Robert Kennedy Jr., the Trump administration, are going to be making an announcement about the link between autism and various pharmaceuticals. And I think that probably by the middle of October, they'll be announcing the suspension of the COVID-19 vaccines in America for safety grounds. Now, what will happen in the UK? I don't know. We are so biased over here, we might even just carry on as if nothing had happened, because I don't know if any of you saw it, but I saw the first cabinet meeting that RFK attended with Trump when they formed the new administration in January. And when you've got the head of Health and Human Services, like our NHS effectively, and social care, saying to President Trump, I need to make an announcement on camera that the department I've taken over, Health and Human Services, has been the main conduit of child trafficking into America, and I've stopped it. And nothing was ever mentioned in our press. None of our media. What does that tell you about what's going on in this country? Because, as I come back to the point, anything that no one wants to talk about is a red flag, isn't it? They don't want to talk about that. They don't even want to report on it. So it might be that that the vaccines are exposed for what they are in America, But they try and hold the line over here in Europe and say, well, we think they're safe and effective, and the Americans have gone mad or something, and or they've been talking to Andrew Bridgen too much. I don't know. Maybe. But I know that the truth is like a lion. It doesn't need protecting. The truth can actually look after itself. All we need, ladies and gentlemen, is the courage to set it free. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll take some questions now.
Dear Andrew, you're an incredibly courageous man. What sustains you?
What sustains me? The truth. I took very seriously that the job of an MP was to protect the best interests of the people who you were there to represent. And I didn't have a very happy childhood myself, so I just, whenever anyone's doing something horrible to children, it really gets me. I can't stand it. I can't stand by and let anything happen. So I had no choice. And to be honest, all those speeches and empty chambers, and they wouldn't, my colleagues, friends, so-called friends, there is a phrase in Parliament, they say, if you want a friend in politics, get yourself a dog. And it's true. So all my friends in Parliament, when they were told by the whips, don't speak to Andrew Bridgen anymore, after the 13th of December 2022, I spent 20 months in Parliament eating every one of my meals on my own. But there are 4,000 real people in Parliament, and they know, and they're quite politically aware. And they're the cooks and the cleaners and the security guards and the clerks. What sustained me, the number of nights when I would walk out of Parliament late at night on my own, and there'd be a black lady mopping the floor with her trolley, and she'd look up and down. I've never seen this woman before in my life. I'd look up and down. She'd look up and down the corridor to make sure there was no one about. And as I walked by, she'd pounce on me, grab me, put her arms around me, and said, "Keep going, Andrew. We're all praying for you. You're right." And that happened every other day. Or one of the waitresses, or one of the doorkeepers, or one of the security guards. And they'd always say they got my back. And one of the lady Tory MPs who was new, and she's lost her seat, obviously at the last election, and she came to me, she did actually speak to me, which is like a bit of a naughty one, because they wasn't really allowed to, and she said, "Andrew, I really worry about you. You seem so isolated." And I said, "Well, you've not been here very long, have you?" I said, "I know you think I'm isolated because none of the MPs talk to me, but it's actually the other MPs are isolated. I'm quite with the people, to be honest, and that's why you all have to have bodyguards and security, and I don't. That's just how it is." By the way, they'd made a big thing that me saying about crimes against humanity and the vaccine, it was causing them to have to up the security at Parliament all the time, wasn't it? That's what Penny kept saying. They took all my security measures off me that I had, like the panic button at home, the CCTV, the burglar alarms. They took all that off me and all my staff in August 2022 and never gave it me back. While they were having all these extra security, they took all mine away from me. That's a lovely, lovely, lovely people. So all of that support from the public, and when I spoke out and they cancelled me off the media, I had, in that fortnight after the 13th of December speech in 2022, I was getting over 100,000 emails a week into my office from all over the world, mostly from the vaccine harmed and the vaccine bereaved. So they cancelled me off the media, but there was we had a lot of work to do. That's what kept me going. And I didn't come into Parliament to see children hurt if I could do anything about it. Yes.
Hi. Thanks for everything you're doing, Andrew. What do you think about the thoughts or the rumours that the illegal immigrants are being allowed in to take over from the police when we all start rioting?
I've seen a MOD paper where they're being proposed as they could be useful to the nation in the event of when they try and get the war going. That they will be looking, because they fear that a lot of people won't fight, and they think, quite rightly, I mean, what would we be fighting for? We'd be fighting for freedom of speech in this country. 12,000 people locked up, criminally convicted a year, the most of any country in the world, for social media posts. We've got, as what did Keir Starmer say, we've got a great history of free speech in this country, and it is history, isn't it? It is history. It's not anymore. So I don't know. It's we are absolutely on the edge here. They're pushing us. If we sign up to the digital ID, if you say yes to digital ID, you'll never be able to say no to any government ever again. They do not want a general election, and the easiest way for them to deliver that is what the globalists want, and they'll make a lot of money out of it, just like they made a lot of money out of COVID, because they always know what's happening next. The BBC has said the world's wealthiest people, while everyone else was locked down, losing money, losing their businesses, destitute, the wealthiest people in the world increased their wealth by 40 and 50%. That's not a secret. That's called insider trading. They already knew what was going to happen, didn't they? The chances of even this group, we're a group, aren't we? Because we're here at Hope tonight. We're a group, a discrete group. And if we were all to suddenly increase our wealth by 40% over a certain period compared to the rest of the country, that would be insider trading as well, because it just can't happen, can it? That we all made the right decisions, these people in this small group. Well, I mean, they'll be doing exactly the same with the war. The EU have been selling war bonds for 2 years. And the problem with when you sell war bonds is, as far as I can see, you owe somebody a war, don't you? That's what you're selling. And they want this war with Russia to be 8 years. They want to balkanize Russia, because Russia's got $75 trillion of known mineral and petrochemical reserves in its borders. It's the biggest country in the world. It's only got 145 million people. And they want to take, and BlackRock, Vanguard and Stateside have got no access to those resources, and they want it. And it also hasn't got a Rothschild-controlled central bank, and that's on the list, isn't it, for destruction. So it's pretty dodgy times. But if we've got Trump, if he's not completely on the dark side, and he can't be, and I think Putin is pretty level-headed. He knows what's going on. I think we've got the best chance we possibly have. But the humanity, our future, will turn on the cards of luck at the table over the next 12 months. If we end up with digital ID, that's a huge trap, which it's always going to be in life much easier to avoid a trap than to try and get out of it once we're in. And of course, if you can get us into a war, you'd expect to probably have to have ID cards during a war, which we had before. I mean, that solves everything for them. That solves everything for them. It is irresistible that they will want to create a war, and you know that the false flag industry in this country, we are brilliant at it. But I'm hoping that all that stuff from Russiagate, you know who started all that, don't you? That was MI6. So I'm hoping that comes back to backwash over here as well. And also what I'm hoping is that the tsunami of truth and justice comes across the Atlantic from Kennedy and his team, and I'm hoping it's going to sweep away the self-serving politicians we've got in Europe and the rest of the world. As Bannister gets.
Thank you. And I'm going to try and squeeze two questions into one here. Digital ID you mentioned. What's your take on Together declaration and Alan Miller, the No to Digital ID campaign.
I've spoken on stage with Together. They're pretty good at nicking other people's events, I've noticed. So, I mean, they're astute. So they'll get 50, 100 Corex boards saying Together, farmers, no food. And then all of a sudden, everyone's holding them up on the pictures and it looks like they organised the farmers' rally when they didn't. But, I mean, that's just good operating procedure. But, I mean, I am completely with him on... There's a lot of people don't want to talk about... Nigel Farage doesn't have a view on digital ID. How can you not have a view on digital ID? You know? What's the Conservative Party... Well, not that it really matters. What's the Conservative Party's view on digital ID? We know the Labour Party's view is whatever Keir Starmer tells them it is. Throughout history, you're always being asked to give up your freedoms for convenience and safety. And anybody historically who's ever given up their freedoms will never get convenient. Well, it'd be very convenient for the government, and you will not get safety. I think it's Robert Kennedy Jr. said the other day that every piece of legislation brought in by every government is always pushed to the extreme of its power. Well, we've given them extreme power with digital ID, and that you can never, ever, no one's ever complied their way out of totalitarianism, ever. And we're not going to do it. We've got to stand up and say no, as painful as that will be. Otherwise, for future generations, they will never even know the freedoms they didn't have that we gave away for them.
This is just a quickie. I just wondered, the two nasty bills coming up that they're trying to push through, aren't they?
There aren't many good ones at the moment, I've noticed.
To include autism, to include mental health, to include depression, to include...
Well, the assisted suicide bill, I spoke against it in 2014 and saw it off. And also we got rid of the Liverpool care pathway. That was reintroduced in 2020 as NICE Guideline 163 became NICE Guideline 191. The reason they're bringing in assisted dying is because, quite honestly, they've been doing it without your permission for a very long time, and they're trying to... It's a bit like, Keir Starmer, mysteriously only a few months ago saying, oh, by the way, we're just going to spend 50 million and do some experiments on geoengineering. We've never done any before, by the way. But we need to do some experiments because so many people know what's going on. They haven't got any cover anymore. That's why the assisted dying bill's coming in, because it's going to come out about what was done during the pandemic. It was midazolam in the UK and Ireland and Portugal and Australia. It was remdesivir in Canada and the US and lots of other countries, and that's what's going on. You do realise that hospitals have quotas of number of people they have to euthanise a year already, and if they euthanise more, they get more money.
Isn't that disgusting?
You don't realise? That's how it is.
Well, babies.
So when you go in, if you're over 60, and I declare an interest, I'm over 60. Your vulnerability scored if you go into hospital for an operation, and if you get more than 6 points, you're not getting it. You're on end of life care, right? You get 6 points for Alzheimer's or dementia. So basically, if you go into hospital with dementia or Alzheimer's, you're going to be dead. That's basically it.
And the other most serious one as well, I think, with the babies, pushing this abortion right up to live birth virtually.
Well, humanity's under attack at both ends, yeah. And then they say we're not having enough children, so we've got to bring loads of migrants in. Well, who stopped us having children?
But can we all tag our MPs again? Is it worth... I mean, is it too late? The bills are being...
Well, they are criminals. They definitely should be tagged, yes.
Yeah. I'd like to hang them.
Oh, sorry. Yes. It's the House of Lords. We need to lobby the House of Lords really to that's the best chance we've got now of stopping the assisted dying bill. And you'd think because the members of the House of Lords are so old, they might not want to be euthanised, mightn't they? Yeah. I did say to them, actually, if they wanted House of Lords reform, I was rather cruel. I said, in the winter, all you've got to do is knock the heating off for a week and a half and they'll be gone. I mean, natural wastage. It's the most expensive old people's home in the world, the House of Lords, you know. Fantastic.
Thank you. We've got a question here.
I just actually want to ask about Trump and your view on it's a very confusing picture. People like
He's
Catherine.
mercurial, isn't he?
Yeah, but Catherine Austin Fitz and Whitney Webb call
I
it
know
the
Catherine
PayPal.
very well.
They call it the PayPal presidency. And as we're talking about digital ID, and he's come over here and we've got banquets with all the CEOs of the tech companies. There are good things he's doing, but that is, as we all know, is the most crucial thing. All the tech companies tying us up in this digital ID, and Trump seems to be supporting that. What's your view on this?
And the situation with Israel, but I don't think he does like Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, I don't think even his own mother likes Bibi Netanyahu, does he? She doesn't, does she? No, it's a huge concern. It's a huge concern. I hope that the public are going to wake up, and at the end of the day, Trump is pretty susceptible to public opinion, isn't he? Do I think he's good? I don't think anyone's all good. I mean, it's not black and white. It's not black and white. Is Putin a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. Some of the things I think, yeah, we're human, aren't we? But if you think, is he going to have to fight different battles at different times? Last time. Why was he out of office in the end last time, when he shouldn't have been really? It's because he took on too many people at once, didn't he? And they were all against him, and they were all fixing the election on him. I don't know. All I know is with Trump is that had it been Kamala who won, I know we would have been at war with Russia by last Christmas, right? That is he all good? Undoubtedly not. Some people love Elon Musk, and he's fallen out with Trump. But I mean, Elon Musk pretty much says that we ought to have computer chips put in our head. I mean, that's the end of humanity. We're done. That trumps the digital ID, you know. So I mean, is Musk a good guy? Some of the time he might be. He's given us X. That's a good thing. But these other things aren't good, are they? Yeah, and I was there, and I've spoken at these last three, but I can't stand by and see some Maoris and some weird New Zealand preacher ripping a Palestinian flag in half and think that that's reasonable or uniting the nation, because I don't think it is, and I can't support that. And I've told Tommy that. That's beyond the pale for me. And I'm not on the Palestinian side, I'm not on the Israeli side. I just don't want to see any more killing. And as I said many times in the Chamber of the House of Commons, the appalling situation on the 7th of October, 1,200 Israeli civilians murdered horrifically. But is the murder of 75, 80, 100,000 is that proportionate now? Is that proportionate? And there's a lot of questions about how those Hamas terrorists got across that border, and whether the troops were stood down, and why it took 7 hours in a country you can fly over in an hour in a helicopter to go and sort out. There's a lot of questions about all of that which have not been answered.
Any others? Any other questions?
Chappie at the chap that.
Anybody else over here? Sorry, you've asked a question, so I'm going to go to...
Hi, just a quick one. What's your view on devolution?
Devolution, I think in the form we've done it, it's been a disaster, but we do need devolution to local communities, because only through centralisation can you have the control to cause the mayhem and the harm that's been caused across the world. if the NHS was not national health service, if it was more of a local health service, they wouldn't be able to coordinate it to do what it's been doing to us. Centralisation of power is a very bad thing. You need to get it closer to the people. But the answer is, and I'll if you'll indulge me, I've been in the system for 14 years. This is a system that's got us into the mess we're in today, right? Around the world. You think this system's going to get us out of this mess? No, it's not. This system does not suit you, your families, or local communities. This system is set up for the people it's serving, which is the super elites. So that system's got to go. It's not much of it I'd keep. It's not serving any function. If it was up to me, I would halve the number of MPs tomorrow. We don't need 650. 325 is more than enough to monitor. Right? You can't trust politicians. They can easily be bought and corrupted. I would pay them twice as much money, cost you no more, pay them twice as much money, make the constituencies twice as big, and say there is no external income, no interests while you're an MP, no lobbying allowed. And I would get rid of the House of Lords tomorrow. There'd be no use whatsoever. And I would move the UK to a form of direct democracy where you, the people, become the second chamber. You have to pass to referendums every 3 months all the laws. And any laws you don't pass do not become law. And you'll say, well, I don't want to be involved in politics. I don't like politics. People will say, I'm not interested in politics. Look at the situation we're in when you abdicate your responsibilities to be involved in politics to other people. You can't be allowed to happen ever again. I'm sorry, you might not be interested in politics, but the politicians you've got now are very interested in you, I can tell you. It's got to stop. So the only way is the combined wisdom of the public in a full plebiscite is always better than that chamber, because it can't be corrupted. But to do that, we also need a fair and free media to report on the debate and the issues so that we can have a free and fair debate. We haven't got that at the moment either, but that's ultimately be my solution. I'd get rid of the Bank of England. I'd issue Treasury money as in line with the Treasury can produce money. We don't need a central bank. You know that every coin in your pocket is money, isn't it? It's M4 money. It's issued by the Treasury, not the Bank of England. All the coins are. So if they can issue coins, why can't they issue notes? Why? That means that government borrowing would be interest-free. Why do we have to pay a bank for interest on money that they've only created from nothing anyway, and then get to charge us interest? 90 billion a year of interest on our national debt. Who thought that one up? It suits the bankers. So that would be. And I've been looking at some ideas on taxation. How do you fancy? I'll just run this one by you. How do you fancy a new system of taxation where I get rid of all taxes we've got now, every single one, and bring in something called a banking transaction tax, which is probably something around about 0.25% on the payer and payee of every single bank transaction going through a UK bank, which will bring in more money than all the taxes and widen and also mean that the people with the most money who transact the most transactions, you're going to pay the most tax. And there's no escape from it. You can have an offshore trust where you've hidden all your money. If you transact in the UK, you pay the tax. If you transact in the UK and you transact to a receiving bank outside the UK, which is not in our system, you pay 0.5%. That helps people keep money in the country. If you bring money into the country, I charge you nothing. You can move money between your accounts if they're in the same names. So, i.e., if you and the wife or your partner had a deposit account, and you wouldn't get charged for moving money between accounts with the same names. My only caveat is obviously excise duties, whether it be prudent to drop cigarettes from £15 a packet to £4 overnight, or whiskey from £18 to £5 a bottle. And I would propose that on tobacco and hard spirits, we reduced it by 20% a year over 5 years, and had a committee looking at the sociological changes that were happening by reducing those taxes. But I would take the tax off beer and wine straight away. And all fuel, there'd be no fuel duty, there'd be no car tax, no insurance tax, no inheritance tax, no income tax, no council tax, no business rates, no corporation tax. None of those.
Somebody make this.
And also, you see, then also 90% of the people in inland revenue can be moved into more productive work, and all we have to do then is inspect the banks, and we know they're crooks, so we need to keep an eye on them anyway, because they'll be collecting all the taxes, and they could send the money to the Treasury every night, and we don't need to have people analysing how the economy is doing, because we get a readout every night of how much transactions have gone through the whole country, and we get the money. And no one would need a tax return, because you just produce your bank statement. It'll have every single. Yeah, cash is not a problem. You draw cash out of the bank. You pay 0.25%. Somebody else pays the cash into the bank. They pay 0.25%. The only way of avoiding it is trading constantly in large amounts of cash at home. Well, the first time you get robbed for 0.25%, it's not really going to be worth it, is it? It's far harder to evade the tax, and it's such a wide base of tax that it actually, I calculate it on last year's figures, bringing £300 billion more tax than all the taxes we've got now.
Wow. Thank you, Andrew. We're going to have one more question.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for tonight. I think this is the last question, actually. Going back to the science stuff, if we're really pinning our hopes on exposing the DARPA thing that you mentioned from Trump and RFK, don't you think we need to get a list of all the scientific disparities and incongruences together and open up a channel of if you've got a channel of communication open with RFK, I think that would be useful. Things like, the excess deaths, whether intubation and the treatment was actually part of that, etc.
All I would say is,
thanks.
I don't think I think he'll do all that, but RFK, after Trump himself, RFK must be currently the most threatened man, one of the most threatened people on the planet. Yeah. I mean, Big Pharma would like to get rid of him. It's not all down to him, but I said about the economic growth and prosperity in North West Leicestershire, it wouldn't have happened without him. Yeah.
But if we can get from the UK side a conduit open to help that guy, you're probably a good point of contact to do that. And I mean, I've got a science background, as I've told you. I'm happy to help in that, getting a list together of all those incongruences that happened in COVID, both before the vaccine and after.
Well, the Americans aren't signing up to the pandemic agreement. Our damn government are basically handing over our country's healthcare again during a pandemic, which the organisation taking the powers are going to decide when we're in a pandemic or a climate emergency or any public health emergency of international concern as defined by the World Health Organization. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, they've got such a bad track record of advice during the last pandemic, and then you've got so many countries around the world, the vast majority of their governments want to give away the powers. I mean, if we give away these powers to the Director General of the World Health Organization, I would say the unelected, unaccountable, non-tax-paying, immune from prosecution due to diplomatic immunity, Director General of the WHO. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Why would we want to do that? Why would any... I mean, Starmer and his Labour Party, I was telling my friend, the Labour MP, 14 years he wanted to get into power, if you call that power.
What about the Fabians?
Or he wanted to get into power, and now they want to give control during a pandemic, which I think... Do you think we'd have more or less pandemics if we gave them the power to decide when they got a pandemic and they took the power? And also, they have the power to say when the pandemic's over. Well, I think it'd be a long time before they gave all the power back to those independent... So they want to do that. Is just giving all our military and our police and our secret services and our nuclear deterrent to the European Union, to Ursula von der Leyen, unelected Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, there's not much left, really, is there? They wanted to be in power, but they gave it all away, which is very, very strange, isn't it? We need to get back to proper science, and we've got to start teaching the children proper science. I mean, the biggest fraud that's being perpetrated against people today, the children, is this net zero rubbish, demonising carbon dioxide, which is the gas of life. I mean, there is so much wrong at the moment. If we could get some decent people in with working for the people, it wouldn't take much to turn it round, because just stop the bad stuff happening, and that wouldn't be difficult. Just stop the bad stuff. And I think something's coming, and it's coming quickly, and there will be a time when we're going to have to stand up. And to be honest, what's the worst that can happen to you? Because if we don't do anything, we know where we're going to end up anyway, don't we? So you will know. You will know, I promise you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. But you have a great audience. Thank you.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I think, Andrew Bridgen, that was the best talk we've ever had at HOPE Sussex Community. I genuinely am so moved by that talk. I cannot tell you. And this marquee should be packed with people listening to this man. And the reason why they're not here is because they think that all MPs are cowards, spineless cowards, and they'd be right, wouldn't they? But not this one. Not this man. Your courage, your integrity, it's unbelievable. It's absolutely incredible and so inspirational. And I ask all of you to support this man as much as you can, and to make sure that everybody does and everybody listens to this man, because you are hope, Andrew Bridgen.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow, wow, wow. You took the words, that was exactly the same words I was going to say. That was without a doubt the best, finest, most eloquent, absolutely amazing talk we have ever had at HOPE. I am so, so honoured that we finally got you to get you here today, Andrew. Every single one of you tonight have witnessed being completely vindicated of everything that you have been accused of being over the last 5 years. You have just heard it. The corruption, the rot, it goes right to the very top. Exactly what we knew. When we marched on the streets of London, we knew we were right. We felt it in our hearts, in our bones. We knew that absolutely we were right. We were so right all along. And we have got the perfect person who's been in such a position to hear about all of these stories, standing here tonight with such integrity and bravery and courage to speak his truth, to tell us all exactly what was going on, everything that we knew. And I'm so, so incredibly proud to share the stage with you. Okay, so well done. Please put your hands together again for Andrew Bridgen.